Okay, so then we have our, again, this is just like what it is. We drew all this. So the FSH stimulates the follicle and granulosa cell growth, and that's why we have that development of the follicle, and that's why we have an increase in estrogen as the follicle develops. Now, what does the estrogen do? Now, this is the very tricky part. Around day 10 to 12, okay, so if you really like molecular biology, you can look up what happens. The interesting thing is that GnRH, the estrogen just before ovulation, well, it's always doing something in the background to GnRH or not GnRH, to the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. Even though it's kind of inhibiting the GnRH, FSH, and LH, it's actually increasing the receptors for GnRH on the pituitary gland, while also somehow that also affects the activity in the hypothalamus in terms of producing and secreting GnRH. So it actually goes from negative feedback and switches to positive feedback around this part. So estrogens are actually good. This is why you get that surge. But remember, we have that inhibin. So inhibin, again, is not, even though FSH and LH are like siblings, it treats LH better than FSH, so it's kind of bullying FSH and keeping it suppressed. And then LH, this is the one that triggers ovulation. And why? So luteinizing forms the corpus luteum. So it's not coincidental. Now what we have here is okay, go back to the midpoint around, again, in the typical, or in a 28-day sample cycle, it's around day 14. So this is what happens. We have ovulation. Now it's in the fallopian tube. Okay, so with the luteal phase, what happens? Well, we have ovulation, and this is around day 14 in the 28-day cycle. And this corpus luteum is now going to become progesterone dominant. So again, there's still estrogen, but now there's more progesterone than estradiol. So the granulosa cells, they just switch their specialty, and then you still produce estradiol and inhibin. But what this does is that this combination of hormones suppresses the rest of the HPO axis. So again, all of these three together, due to negative feedback, keep these low until the next menstrual cycle. Now what happens is that estradiol, this is very important. So common misconception is that they think, okay, progesterone is the only one for the endometrium. Actually, estradiol is the one that starts off the regeneration of the endometrium. So what happens is that during this part, you actually have a buildup of the endometrium. So the endometrium is undergoing mitosis, and then progesterone is going to, so this is, progesterone sounds like progestation. And what's gestation? Well, gestation is carrying embryo or fetus to term. So what it does is it maintains and builds up the endometrium. And why do you want that to happen? Well, what occurred at day 14? Remember, ovulation occurred at day 14. The ball is in play, like I like to say. So say that ovum gets fertilized. What do you want? You want to prepare a landing pad for that embryo or to develop and implant in, right? So it makes sense that you have progesterone, which builds up and thickens this endometrial layer to prepare a landing pad for a potentially fertilized egg. So what does it also do? It also calms down the myometrium. It's going to inhibit the uterine contractions. Why? Well, again, if you're trying to implant an embryo and carry it to term, does it make sense to have this layer being contracted and moving all the time if the myometrium is contracting? No, right? So again, the progesterone is going to help build up this layer further and also calm down the uterus and prevent it from contracting as much. So what happens at this point? Say there's no implanted embryo, there's no fertilization, and now this corpus luteum is maturing and now being converted to corpus albicans. Well, what do you notice? With the loss of these granulosa cells and being replaced by fibrous collagen, you're not going to get all these hormones anymore.